Right. Welcome back, everyone. As you'll remember, we adjourned the last meeting on the 25th of November, and we're now resuming, so we don't need to do the current here, but I'll ask James to do that at the closing if you don't mind. It'd be lovely. So just to recap, at the last meeting we heard all the deputations and we received and confirmed that we had read the written submissions, and thank everyone again for coming in. We also had quite a lengthy question and answer session with staff on this report, so we've done a fair bit of the work so far. And the reasons that we adjourned was so that we could host an information session for the public on the technical aspects of the options in the recommendation, and also so that we could invite interested residents and councillors to make a site visit to the organics processing plant. So today we're going to resume where we left off in the meeting, and I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind us, the public here to allow us to consider this matter without disruption, please. Look, we're all working together on the best and quickest way that we can solve this issue of odour from this plant for the residents affected in the Bromley area, and we are committed to this. And I note that in March 2020, it was then that ECAN advised us that they had evidence pointing to the organics processing plant and EcoCentral as a major contributor of the odour. Not the sole contributor, but major. So EcoCentral at that time underwent changes and is now compliant. There's no odour coming from there. And in March, our staff embarked on an adaptation plan, which was tweaking the recipe and other things. But they also began work on a redevelopment project, which is before us today. And as a result of the community engagement and the further work that staff have crafted, we now have an updated resolution before us. And I'm going to read that out today. Oh, welcome, James Goff. Yeah. Okay, so the resolution now reads, 1, approve the redevelopment of the organics processing plant to mitigate the potential emissions of dust and odour from composting operations. Include the upgrade of in-vessel processing to leading international standards in order to achieve a more mature and stable output product. The upgrades are to include increasing the capacity of the aeration system through redesign and replacement of the composting tunnel floors, upgrade of air extraction technology and replacement of composting tunnel doors to achieve a better seal, improving irrigation and control systems to maximise the efficiency of in-vessel processing, upgrading the biofilter to manage additional airflow, including installing a partition allowing renewal of filtration media without disruption of treatment, replacing the shredder to manage energy consumption and maximise processing efficiency. And number 2, agree staff initiate a detailed scope of works to develop user requirements for the approved plant redevelopment. 3, request that staff develop a procurement plan to expedite or speed up the redevelopment, including the design, procurement and construction, and for the procurement plan to be presented at the Finance and Performance Committee meeting on the 25th of March 2021. 4, request that staff enter contract negotiations with the current operator to allow for recommendation 1 above to progress. B, remove avoidable organic material from the process, including commercial food waste, until the upgrades are completed. And C, to reduce throughput if required to accelerate the construction. 5, request staff assess odour reduction following redevelopment of the plant, reporting back to this committee with the outcome. And if required, this committee will then proceed to allow for the funding and building of an additional structure to enclose the maturing and screening of compost. The new structure would be fully ventilated with air treated via a biofilter. B, receive staff advice on processing green waste from the neighbouring eco-drop transfer station and other sources within the composting tunnels if capacity allows or at another location. And 6, request staff assess the feasibility of new technology such as anaerobic digestion prior to the current contract end date of 2024. And then I would just like to add one more, which is that staff continue to engage with the Bromley community and provide progress reports on the redevelopment. So I would actually like to move that resolution now. James Daniels would like to second it. And I would like to just open it up if anyone has any further questions for staff that were not covered at the last meeting. Melanie?
I've got a question about the resolution where it says, where was it? Request staff assess the odour reduction following redevelopment of the plant. There's no time frame.
Sorry, I can answer that. So we don't have the final time frame for the redevelopment works yet. As soon as we know that time frame, we can obviously commit to coming back with an evaluation of how effective it is. But what we would be looking at is once the plant has been upgraded, we would assess the odour impacts of the new facility, and if required, we would progress with the enclosure of that additional area.
It could say over a set period after redevelopment has been finished, which it doesn't say, so that we know it's not going to take you I'm not complaining, but you know, so we know roughly when it might come back.
3 months?
So 6 months?
You said 3.
3. So would you like to, we can pop that in. So that would go in,
right?
request staff assess odour reduction by within 3 months of
Following or whatever.
following the redevelopment completion or completion.
So following commissioning of the redeveloped plan.
In 5, the first sentence.
Yes.
Within in 3 months.
After reduction,
Yep.
within 3 months.
Thanks, Melanie. Yanni?
Thank you. I was just wondering if I'm going to get a response to the questions I put through after the meeting on Monday.
So we got some questions in this afternoon. I think you may have sent them yesterday, but we just received them this afternoon. I've got some responses drafted. We just haven't managed to get them back through the chain to you. But if you have anything specific that you want me to answer right now, I can.
Are they related to this resolution, Yanni?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Could we maybe re-ask them, Yanni, and we'll see whether staff got the answers to them?
Are you looking for them now?
Oh yeah. I'm just bringing them up. Well, yeah, in number. Basically, this is following the community meeting. I was keen to know what letters we'd received from the Medical Officer of Health, and if so, can these be please shared with the community and sent through? I see that we do have a 2015 letter from the Medical Officer of Health, but given what we've experienced in the last few years, have we got anything more recent?
Does anyone know?
Because the health
Okay.
concerns were quite a key thing
And
that people raised.
if we did have, are they able to be? Is that letter? Would it be able to be shared with the public? Does anyone know?
We do not have any more recent letters from the Medical Officer of Health, and the advice has consistently been that if people are experiencing health problems, they should talk to their general practitioner.
That's great.
That being said, we did raise the concerns from the community meeting with Canterbury District Health Board.
Yes.
So flagging that those concerns were raised. So that is with the Medical Officer of Health.
Thank you. So, okay. So if we receive a letter back from them, are we able to share that? Can you find out, and then we will share it through the community network?
Yep.
Thank you. Next question.
Right. So, just in regards to that, I mean, have we made them aware of the reports that we've got in terms of monitoring?
Okay, Yanni, we've got a resolution here.
Right.
to
Okay.
move
So the
on.
Legion. So that my understanding is that ECAN has advised that it's up to Living Earth to monitor for Legionnaires. Are they
Yes.
monitoring for it?
Yes.
And are those results able to be shared as well with the community? And how are they shared at the moment?
That they can be shared. They've all come back as zero, any surveillance testing, and I can share them.
Thank you, that'd be great.
yeah.
Right, okay. I was really keen to understand what odour and dust modelling had been undertaken with the current site design and how that compares to the proposed odour and dust modelling for what is proposed in terms of the redevelopment.
Yeah, so environmental modelling would take place in the next phase when the detailed scope and design is completed during the procurement phase. It's not something that's been done to date. The predominant, and I'm assuming you meaning things like dispersion modelling from the biofilter and that sort of thing, because that will be done, but yeah, during the detailed design phase of the process.
I mean, what I'm really trying to understand is when the plant was first constructed, we must have done some assessments about what the odour impact would be. And obviously, as we're going into this new design, we would want to have confidence that was robust. So what you're saying is in the next stage, we will be able to look at what odour modelling was done previously versus what the new odour modelling is showing, both for odour and dust.
I can say confidently we'll be doing dispersion modelling of the biofilter output. I'm not entirely sure exactly what odour modelling you're expecting from the other parts of the process. It's definitely something we can look at and provide if it's possible.
Right.
And that will be in the report back after
Yeah.
the 3 months. So you'll bring a report back on it. Yeah, next question.
I asked for how many complaints and how many non-compliance notices we've had in November and up until today.
So I think that was on the ECAM website. It's now up on a public report. My understanding is there's 14 non-compliances. I'm not sure the exact number of complaints. They're done through smelters, which are obviously not all relating to
However,
one location.
we have been advised by Environment Canterbury that this plant is a major source of odour, and we are addressing that today. So I really want to move ahead, Yanni. That information is on ECAN's website. We can
Right.
all access that, but
But
we want to go on and fix this today.
Sure, I understand that. But given that people were told when the adaptive management plan was released that there'd be a significant reduction in odour,
It didn't work.
and actually it's not that it just didn't work, the problem appears to be getting worse.
Yeah,
and I was really keen to know if we know why the problem's been getting worse, because when I got the November results last night, and it showed twice as many non-compliances
Yanni, I would
from
suggest
October
that it's
and
possibly
3
got
times
worse
as many complaints,
because
I think we need
the
to
doors
give an
leak,
answer.
the tunnels are old, the infrastructure's old. What we've got here today is a redevelopment of an old site that could quite potentially have been earthquake damage, as well as you rightly brought up this morning, Phil. So I want to move on and look at getting this resolution through so that we can help these people with their
Right.
lives.
So nothing we're aware of in the last month has led to twice as many non-compliance notices and 3 times as many complaints. We have no idea what's caused that.
I mean, if we're looking at operational issues, there's potential sources, but there's nothing concrete that we can point to that would suggest it's a reason for it getting substantially worse.
Right.
Right, and the recipe changes, what's been the outcome of those?
Well, I think it's as it's been mentioned before, that the complaints have continued throughout this process. So you would suggest they've not been successful at eliminating odour issues in the community.
So any other questions? Aaron?
Yeah, so given that, follow on from Yanni's point around we were told a whole lot of stuff would be done and it would reduce the odour, and then it appears to not have at this point. With spending all this money and doing all this work now, do we have guarantees that it will smell like the one on my side of town? I know it's not a processing plant, but where we receive all the rubbish and all the green waste and all the hard fill and everything over in my side of town, right next to Regent's Park, we don't get complaints because it doesn't smell. And will the people on this side of town have that at the end of this?
Yeah, I can probably chime in on this one. So first of all, with the adaptive management plan, which was our response to Environment Canterbury's odour pilot, where they determined that it was the transfer station and Living Earth that were the likely contributors to the odour in Bromley. So we presented that adaptive management plan in 2 phases. Phase 1 was the operational changes, which we hoped would reduce the odour, and phase 2 was to look at redevelopment options to eliminate that odour, to mitigate any risk of odour. So we're at a stage where the redevelopment is required because that initial phase, I guess the management phase, hasn't been effective in reducing the odour. So we're at the point of presenting a redevelopment option to council. Part of the comparison with, I believe you're talking the Sticks Mill transfer station. So those operational practices at Sticks Mill have been applied to the Metro Place transfer station, and that's why that site is now deemed to be compliant. So there was initial concerns from Environment Canterbury that the Metro Place transfer station was a cause and a source of odour. By applying the operational controls that are applied at Sticks Mill, that site was able to be determined compliant. And that's led us just to focus solely on the organics plant and bring you this redevelopment option today, as you've said, to mitigate the risk of odour from the 2 sites.
And will spending this much money guarantee?
So in terms of guarantees, it's a little bit difficult to say at this point. What we intend to do with the proposal, with the redevelopment design, and we still need to finalise that design, but we want to put it out to tender where the design and build contractor has to meet a certain quality standard, and so that's around maturity of compost at the end of the process. Effectively, they can guarantee us a mature compost at the end of the process that won't smell. So that's going to come into the design spec, which we still need to do following approval to proceed with that redevelopment option.
Great, thanks.
And throughout that entire process, all of the smells trapped.
Yeah, exactly. So all of the processing with the option that we're putting up happens in vessel, so in an enclosed space with the air treated by the biofilter. The finished product remains outside under our proposal, although there's, I guess, the second part to it, which is if that's still deemed to cause odour, that will also be enclosed. So all of the odorous parts of the process would then be enclosed.
And nothing can escape.
No.
So remind us of the current state is, I think, it's 2 weeks in the tunnel, up to 12 weeks outside.
12 to 14 weeks outside.
Yep, and we're going to turn that round to...
Yeah, exactly. So
12 weeks inside, 2 weeks out.
Yeah, exactly. So effectively the active phase of the composting, where material is breaking down, is where you have the highest risk of odour.
Yep.
At the end of that stage, there's about 4 weeks where the compost is settling. And what that means is that, the carbon nitrogen is bonding so that compost is stable. So effectively you could imagine that 2 weeks in the tunnel at the moment, 10 weeks outdoor windrowing, 4 weeks maturing, stabilising, then we screen it and sell it. What we're proposing is all of that processing to happen in the tunnel, the 4 weeks to happen outside where it's bonding, where it's maturing, but where it's already reached a maturity that the odour level is low or non-existent, and then screening and selling. And if that doesn't work, also covering that part of the process.
And noting that they'll be inside in a redeveloped tunnel.
Exactly, yeah.
Darren?
Yeah, so because there's a particular gassing off in the process, and you'll know that the CLS had to move from Main North Road out to middle of nowhere because of it. And for those of us that went past there, like especially early evening, boy, it was strong. Like on Main North Road there, it really kicked you. It's the exact same smell over in Bromley. That's why I know when I'm going past when it's that plant versus something else, the fishy ones and that. But it's that because it has a very distinct odour. They've had to move because they couldn't get it to a level there.
Quite different operations. So CLS,
You can't compare apples with oranges or pears.
It's an outdoor windrow process compared to an in-vessel composting process with that air treated by a biofilter.
Right.
So they are quite separate processes, but admittedly the outdoor maturation phase of the current process is similar to what's happening at those other commercial composters.
And sorry, finally, so whose name goes on the guarantee that this will work? Is it our staff or is it a private company that's done a design for us? Like, where does that lie?
It would be with the design and build contractor.
It'll be in the procurement.
It would be in the tender spec for that.
And are they insured?
Yeah, so it's, the insurance
You're being
aspect of this
positive, Aaron.
work is going to be significant.
Melanie, you've got a question?
Back to resolution 5. The bit where it says, if required, then the committee will build the additional structure. How will we know when there must be some sort of threshold, or like how will we measure that?
So we will work closely with Environment Canterbury in terms of the monitoring of that, and the Environment Canterbury will be consenting the plant they're consenting the plant now, and they are the regulator in terms of determining whether there are offensive and objectionable odours beyond the boundary. So we would work closely with Environment Canterbury on that monitoring, as we have through the pilot program.
So if ECAM was to assess there was no issue, but the residents still thought there was, I guess then it's up to council to make.
We
any
would
further
bring all of that
decisions.
information to council, so all of the information from the monitoring and the view of Environment Canterbury, and then yes, that decision would be for council.
So does that mean that we would also do further surveying of the residents in the area?
We could do further surveying. One of the things that we need to be very aware of when we do surveys across the Bromley area, as in the survey that you received earlier this week, or late last week, I think it might have been, the residents' perceptions of where the odour comes from are that there are more than one source. So they have identified the wastewater treatment plant, the transfer station, and the Living Earth plant, and we know there are other industrial sources there as well. So it is a complex area, and if we do a resident survey, we need to put that information alongside of the monitoring information that we do on the site and the monitoring information that Environment Canterbury do, so that we have a full understanding of what is contributing to the odours in that area.
Yeah, it still would be good to get both, but yeah.
Yes, it would be good to get both and understand the limitations of all the different data sets.
And one other question, which is sort of a tangent slightly, but if the compost is staying inside the tunnels for longer, does that mean lids on coffee cups and things can be commercially composted through there? When they can't now, I think, is that right?
Yeah, so we don't take any compostable packaging through the facility. A lot of it will depend on central government. So currently New Zealand doesn't have official standards for compostability, similar to what they have in a lot of European countries and Australia. Some of that work's going on at a national level, I'm aware, and I think when that comes through, we would have to review our processes. But at this stage, it wouldn't.
You'd have to have a standardised takeaway coffee cup, because they all require different temperatures.
Okay, yeah.
Yanni?
I did send through the questions on Monday around the dust. Can you just tell me how many exceedances of the dust there have been since the plant was established in terms of its consent limits? Because I just think the dust is an issue that we haven't spent a lot of time
But the dust
discussing.
will be
But
treated with this redevelopment, is that correct?
So dust.
If there's an issue with
Yeah,
dust,
well,
it
well,
would
yeah,
be.
I get that. Like
So-
what we're proposing, hopefully, will address the dust issue. But I'd still like to know, given that having attended the liaison group meetings for several years now, that repeatedly being told that there were no exceedances, or there was the dust levels were under the consent limits, and we've just had the independent report come out between when we had last had the committee meeting and this meeting, that shows that I think it quotes 11 exceedances of dust above the consent limits. So I just really wanted to understand, in terms of the history of this plant, how many times has it not met its consent requirements for dust? I mean, the odour stuff is pretty overwhelming. The dust stuff, I would
Do you
really
have the answer
just
to
understand.
So I don't have the figures for the entire life of the plant. For the last financial year, you're correct. There was 11 instances where the number or the limit put in the consent, which is a limit that then we have to notify the regulator, so he can, of it and any mitigating things we're going to do. There was 11 instances, and 10 of them were dust gauges on site. So there's 7 dust gauges on and around site. So 10 of those elevated levels were measured at on gauges within the property boundary before those boundary controls like the misters and the fences and the tree lines. There was one elevated level at the neighbouring property, so just over the boundary fence. The PDP report, which you're referring to, when they looked at that, they determined the likely source was not living earth, and it came from a localised source, likely roadworks, just due to the wind conditions and the activities at the time. So you're correct, there was 11, but 10 of them were on site. So obviously, if there's 10 exceedances before the boundary, and then on the other side of the boundary it's not elevated, that would suggest that those boundary controls are working.
So in simple terms, the consent limits have or have not been breached in terms of dust.
So the consent doesn't have so the limit isn't saying if you're in excess of this, you are in breach of the consent. The consent says that if you're over this, you have to notify the regional council, so ECAN, and you have to look at why there's exceedances and whether any mitigation's required, which is exactly what's been done.
And the final question from me is, and just to give a heads up, I'd like to move some additional amendments, but the final question is, since the plant's been operational, how many times has ECAN served an infringement notice, an abatement notice on council or the operator?
So as far as I'm aware, there's 2 instances where an infringement notice has been issued, and I'm not aware of an abatement notice.
Right.
And do we know what dates those were?
So an infringement notice was issued in 2016, and then an infringement notice was issued yesterday.
Thank you. Have you got an amendment, Yanni?
Yeah, I just wanted to move under clause 1, an additional resolution, which would be 1E, which is building a structure to fully enclose the screening and maturing of compost. And under 7, and sorry,
Oh, hang on, Yanni. That is actually you're actually wanting to move 5A up into 4D. That's the way I do
yeah,
it.
if you want.
I'm
Sorry,
not
it's a
sure
bit-
you want to move it to 4D. You want to shift it to 1E,
Oh, one,
I would
yes,
say,
that's what
because
Yanni
you
wanted.
don't
Yep.
want to negotiate
Thank
with
you.
the existing
Yep.
contractor.
Yeah.
If you wanted us to build
Yep.
that immediately, you'd
Yeah.
shift it into 1,
Yep.
not into...
1E is
But
right.
that is not what the staff's recommendation is here.
Yeah, I understand that's different to
Okay,
the staff
and-
recommendation, but I do think 1E is the appropriate place for it.
Yep.
And just in regards to 7, and sorry, I can't quite
that staff continue
read
to
yours
engage
there.
with the Bromley community and provide progress reports on the redevelopment.
But I just had slightly different wording, but it's kind of similar,
Yeah.
in that the council establish a regular odour and dust monitoring forum with the local community to progress medium and long-term solutions such as potential relocation and or the use of new technology if the odour problems are not addressed through the proposed short-term redevelopment. So it's really trying to find a way to work with the local community for
What I
longer
don't
term
like about that
solutions.
is that it casts negative aspersions on what is currently a very positive report. But if you want to move
No,
that, I
it's-
can't
it's-
stop you. We'd need a seconder for
It's
that.
basically to give an undertaking to the community that if what's being proposed doesn't work, that there is a forum by which other things can be pursued. And I don't think that's different to actually what staff have said. I don't see why it's negative. It's simply just putting it on the table, because what's been clear from the staff advice is that we have to act now. We don't have actually the benefit of time to look at longer term solutions.
We have covered it in 6,
So-
though, that we're looking at, accessing any new technology that comes along at any time to make sure that this end result is going to be the best practice.
I wonder if it's worth noting that we have, as part of the consent, we have the community liaison group, and that would continue.
Yeah.
We have also talked with Environment Canterbury about having a broader forum around Bromley odours, and that would include other sources of those odours, so not just this plant. And we are committed to working with Environment Canterbury on that. And the addition of 7 as it is now, we are very happy to continue
Continue
to
that, yep.
provide information to the community and work with the community as this redevelopment proposal rolls out.
Yep.
So,
So,
there
Yanni-
are those other forum available as well.
And I think that that's well
It's
covered,
just
and I think we've covered the future in 6. And as the mover, I'd be really happy to support your first amendment of moving
Okay. Yeah.
5A up into 1E
Okay.
if the seconder, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
then we'd be, right. Okay, so I will now,
So is that just checking that does that mean that the new structure gets done straight away instead of only if needed?
Yeah.
And how much was that?
4 million,
4 million.
4 million.
And we don't know if it's needed, and staff don't expect that it will be.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. Can we get
I
some
can put it
commentary from staff?
separately,
Yeah.
Well, not even that, just some commentary from the staff.
yes, what,
As we presented in the first report, we are confident that the upgrade of the facility will address both the odour and the dust issues from the plant, and that enclosing the maturing compost and the screening will not be necessary. However, it's there as an option once that redevelopment work has been completed. So our recommendation would be that it is staged and that we only do that further work if it's necessary.
Pauline, that means that with it currently sitting in 1E, if that fails, then there is no 5. So yeah, we could do it. You'd have to do an additional motion. Yep. To do it as a next step.
I mean, just remember, this is coming back in March, and so that's when we'll have greater understanding of the cost and timeframes.
Make a decision now,
Coming back in March, we'll come back with a procurement plan. So basically, we will come back about exactly how it will be procured, and we have to get that signed off by F&P because it will be over the 10 million, which is delegated to staff.
but it will have detailed costings in there by March? Estimates.
Won't have gone to market.
So the only point I was trying to understand is if people were concerned about it, they could still vote against it then. So this would enable that option to be considered when it comes back, and we'd have greater detail about the time frame and the cost,
Yeah,
which
well,
to me
that's
seems
true.
quite sensible,
Yeah,
rather than to not do it now, because we might get cost savings by doing it at the
Either.
same time.
yeah. So do you understand what Yanni's saying? Is this got to come
But
back for?
I'd still be more comfortable if Helen responded to that.
Not a saving if you don't need it.
We don't anticipate that there would be any significant cost savings. It's a separate building for a separate process in terms of that maturing compost and then the screening outside. So it's not part of the redevelopment of the tunnels and the processing hall. So we don't anticipate any significant cost savings from doing it all at once.
So I'm just wondering, I just need some advice about what to do with 1E. So whether we drop it down and make it 8, and I put that first, and if it's lost, it goes back into where it was before. Does that work? Because if it's lost now, we lose it out of, after the resolution.
Okay, so I'm happy to foreshadow. Happy to foreshadow.
Sorry?
I'd do it as an amendment, but it's already been accepted by the mover and seconder.
But there's an amendment?
So I'm happy to foreshadow.
No, because we want it, if it's lost, we want it back where it was so that it's there if it's required.
I'm happy to foreshadow as an additional as a motion, as the extra where it was sitting earlier, if needed, if it fails, that one.
Okay, so
Yep.
what we'll do is we'll open it up for debate.
It's an amendment to the existing resolution. You don't need to foreshadow to put it back. I mean, I think somebody
No, it's not been done as an amendment because
We
Pauline
could get
and James
advice, but
accepted
if
it.
the amendment was lost, it would revert back to the original
It's not an amendment
resolution.
because the mover and seconder have already accepted it.
What we'll do is we'll open it up for debate. When I put the resolution, I'll put 1E separately first. If that fails, I'll put help me Mike, I'll put the rest of the resolution and foreshadow that, or put it back in and then vote on the rest. Yep, okay, we'll do that. All right, so any debate, please?
Start with Yanni. Start with Yanni.
Yanni?
Yeah, can I start off and just thank staff for the report that's in front of us today. I want to acknowledge the fact that ECAN, up until recently, were not taking this matter seriously, but in the last year, they have shown an ability to respond to the numerous complaints that have come in from the local community. That doesn't mean that this is actually a new issue. This is an old issue that began in 2007 and 8 when the waste minimisation strategy of council was adopted. I abstained from that original decision because I had concerns at the time, and I'm deeply disappointed over what has occurred. It looks like, when you look back at what happened, there was a clear lack of odour modelling. It was wrong to locate this facility in a prevailing wind towards a residential area. There was confusion over what was being built and who was responsible if it didn't work. There was a lack of oversight by the regulatory agency ECAN, and there were poor consent conditions that were insufficient to safeguard the community from harm. I personally believe today that we should be moving the processing plant, as it simply cannot be a long-term solution to have such a facility so close to where people live, work and play on the coast. But I'm realistic to know that that option will not have the majority support of my colleagues or staff, and that is because we have to take urgent action now to stop the odour. We just heard we had an infringement notice. The second one has been served on us yesterday. So we must act now and stop the odour as soon as possible. The recommendations that I've proposed are, I believe, the next best thing to moving it. That is to fully enclose this facility and reduce the amount of throughput to ensure that it can be done as quick as possible. We are out of time as a council to fix the stench, and we need to move quickly to reduce it. The odour and dust issues have gone on for far too long, and it should never, ever have come to this. There does need to be clear answers and accountability for how this plant has gone so wrong, but that should be subject to a separate process than the decision we're making today. Finally, I want to offer an acknowledgement and an apology to the local community for the suffering and harm caused to their well-being and quality of life over the past decade. It has been completely unacceptable that they have had to put up with being told that there wasn't an issue when clearly there was.
Thanks, Yanni. Sarah?
Kia ora. I'd like to thank staff for the enormous amount of work that they have done on this, and acknowledge that their expertise has said that at this point it's better to stage this, and that it's not necessary to spend the additional $4 million at this point to fully enclose that last stage. I'm preferring a staged approach where we take the really clear staff advice on that, rather than throwing in money that's not necessarily needed at this stage. It doesn't preclude that, and we can still get the advice and full costings on it without actually committing to do it at this point. So I'll be voting against 1E. But this has been an ongoing odour issue for a really long time, and it needs fixing. It needs fixing as soon as possible, and I'm really glad that we're able to move ahead on this today.
Thank you. Anne, and then Aaron.
Yes, kia ora. I'd like to also acknowledge the staff and the work that has been done here, but also particularly the community who have had a taxing and long period of time of having to manage a very uncomfortable and awful situation. I think we all have huge sympathy for you, and you've been so negatively impacted for such a long time. So we have heard your pain. Today we see a list of recommendations that are very specific and that will address the very real concerns that you have, but also outline a clear plan going forward. It's essential that the community going forward is intimately involved in this process and must be regularly informed about what is happening, why it's happening, and have the opportunity to give feedback to staff about their lived experience and the results of these actions that are before us today. This is the time to move forward, to work together and resolve this. So I will be supportive of the original recommendations today, and once again, thank you for all of you for the effort and time. Particularly, I'd like to thank Yanni for his passion for his community. Well done.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, I would have supported Yanni on moving it to a different site. It's in the wrong place. I went to Bromley Primary, grew up in St John Street, know the area relatively well. Several years ago I was invited to Jeffrey's house for some scones. Thank you for the scones, Jeffrey. For a discussion around this. Ever since then, because I go down that road, Dyes Pass Road, every about once a week. I stop at the Celtic station there, and every time since I've been to Jeffrey's house I get out, I always have a big sniff. At least 2/3 of the time it's horrendous. It's not even bad, it is horrendous, and it's a particular smell that once you know it, because it's like saying, does that smell like peppermint? Yes it does. Does that smell like the processing plant at Bromley? Yes it does. You know it, and it is quite offensive, and my kids often won't get out the car, even if I bribe them with ice cream down there, because it's that bad. So I feel for those residents, and so we should be moving it, but this is a second best attempt. I will reluctantly support it, and why I say reluctantly is I want an ironclad guarantee that when you're spending this many millions of dollars, that what you get at the other end does what it's meant to. If you can still smell it, I want our money back. And I mean that. We should be getting our money back. Don't spend that much money without, and what I meant by insurance was an insurance on the work, not an insurance on if they have a fire or something halfway through, but an insurance that what we ask for, which is for the residents of this area to not smell this odour anymore, they will get that. If they don't get that, we need our money back, and if the contract doesn't have that, when we come back to the procurement policy, this council should not support it. We should move straight to moving it away from Bromley. If it's not got an ironclad guarantee, it should not get past this table.
Phil?
I feel really sorry for the community down there. I think one of the most important things we're doing is getting the commercial food waste out immediately, which I think is a very good move, because listening to some of the people I talked to over the last 4 or 5 months, the rot really set in about 4 or 5 years ago when we started getting more and more of this animal waste, whatever you like. And I feel that, I'll support the whole thing, I feel that it'll be interesting to see by getting rid of the commercial food waste, how much difference that makes over the next 3 or 4 months or 5 months until we actually start building the thing. I think 1E is important because there's dust comes off things all over the place, and as well as the finished article, when it's loaded out onto trucks, there's a lot of dust that sits in the air. As I said to some people the other day, I lived next to a market garden for a long time, and even when the man wasn't working up his paddock, I was still getting dust on the window ledges every day. He just wiped off a slight amount of dust. It's in the air, so I think we should push on with 1E as well, and I'll support it. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak before I close? James, did you want to say anything? Andrew.
Thank you. I'd also like to echo the thanks to staff and, in fact, to the chair and the deputy chair of this committee for a huge amount of work done, both in preparation for the previous meeting and obviously work done on these resolutions in between the previous meeting and today. And I'm pleased to see the strengthening of the resolutions compared to what we looked at the previous meeting. Makes clear that the intent is to reduce the odour and reduce the dust, and to do that as quickly as possible. We need to be able to see the benefits of this work as quickly as we possibly can, and more to the point, the neighbouring community needs to get the benefits of this work as quickly as possible. So we're making improvements as quickly as we can, realising that further monitoring and further work might be required. And in supporting this today, I'm supporting this on the basis that if further work is required, we will be doing that further work. It's important that we do. But there are some aspects of these resolutions that are clearly going to make improvements, and we need to get on with that as quickly as we possibly can. I was pleased to support the matter being deferred from the previous meeting to today and welcome the resolution that makes clear that there will be ongoing meeting with and ongoing sharing of information with the Bromley community. I think that's hugely important. The reality is that this has been a big problem for a long time. And as a regular user myself of the gas station at Dyers Road, I've regularly experienced firsthand the smell in this area, and I can only begin to imagine what living with that could be like. In fact, I find it difficult to imagine what living with that would be like. So I've got a lot of sympathy with the local community and was very pleased that people came along and shared their first-hand experiences with us as we heard through those deputations at our previous meeting. The history is the history, and there may be some of that history that's not good. But the future is the future, and we need to get to that better future for the residents who live in this area, a future without smell and a future without dust as quickly as we possibly can. A stage approached and one which is able to be rolled out quickly is, in my view, the correct approach. So let's agree with this today. Let's get on with the work as quickly as possible, and let's get to some significant improvements, particularly for the community living close to this plant, as quickly as we possibly can.
Thanks. Tim?
Thank you. Look, first of all, I want to thank the Chair for adjourning the meeting earlier on to come back with a process and that will go forward and get the right result for this community. And I do want to thank staff for the work they've done. The old saying, a saving is not a saving if the work's not needed, I don't think really applies here. I think this community has been through enough for a long time, and I think we will do the work once and do it, hopefully, to do it right. So, like my colleague, Mr. Major, I will be supporting this slightly reluctantly with E, because that's that famous saying, you know, like a saving is not a saving if it's not needed. But I do feel for this community, they've been through enough, so let's do the best we can straight off. So I'll be supporting this.
Sam?
Yeah, look, thank you, and I do sympathise entirely with the community as well over this. Look, I actually think that the original resolutions we had before Yanni's amendments made perfect sense, and I say that because it's considered staff advice. They've gone away and done, quite frankly, a really pragmatic way of trying to resolve this in the short term. And look, I agree entirely that in a perfect world we would move this right now, but we would be doing a disservice to the community if we said we were going to do that, because we won't. It'll take at least, I think, 10 years and have substantial costs. So we would be letting you down if we didn't take that approach today, or the approach here. Look, my only concern with Yanni's amendment is that we may be spending this money unnecessarily. The reality is, I think, like the team have said, some changes in terms of the commercial food processing and the like may make a difference. But I think we wouldn't be ruling it out long term. You know, we should just take a pragmatic staged approach. And then, you know, look, I'll be the first one to say that if it's not working, we'll pull this forward as quickly as we can. But I don't think we should rush to spend it for the sake of it now. We should see whether it works, and if not, let's get on and do it really quickly. So I would sort of urge everyone to, you know, back this, but I think, you know, probably 1E isn't entirely appropriate at the moment.
Melanie?
Phil just showed me before a little dirty cloth. That was the amount of dust that had come off someone's windowsill over one day. So I'm going to support 1E, because even if the odour is completely mitigated, I'm assuming that there'll still be the dust that comes off. And even if it's at 1/15 of that amount, I mean, I don't clean my windowsills every 2 weeks. Maybe I'm lazy, but that's a lot of dust there. So I think probably just moving straight to do the additional structure is a good idea. Yep. And I support the community and Yanni and the work done by everyone, so thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. All right, Jimmy.
Because last time we heard from the community, you know, I think empathy is very crucial and important, because every submitters, particularly, is feel very suffering for this kind of special smell, tolerate this smell for many the years. You know. As council, I think we need to more humble ourselves, you know, and more recognize, even because council, our service continue, you know, term by term to continue. But if we
not yet do the well, we need to recognize, before we are not doing well, then how to be can improve and better can do it. But if one in here, it looks like, we can build in additional structure for enclose those the maturing and the screening of the compost. That looks like it's much better, can prevent this kind of the special smell again. And like the term he mentioned, if we do it, in a one time, we can do it well. So I think that's where we will be the crucial, and also the film show us this one. If we live in this area for many years, how do we think? And particularly in my White Hornby area, Marcy Road, this one, the people just stronger, then the developer just withdraw the extension of the application for the resource concern. So I would like to support this amendment 1E, yes.
Right. Anybody else? All right, well, as the mover, I'll Jane. Yes?
Kia ora. I firstly want to acknowledge the staff who have worked really hard at this and have been under tremendous pressure. I take my hat off to you all for fronting up to the community and presenting this redevelopment in person. So, ka pai. To the community, I know that you've had issues for years and years and years, and I am confident that what we do today will have an ongoing effect that will affect your well-being, and you will, I'm confident, be in a better place. I also want to acknowledge the community board who have been working on behalf of their community in that area, and especially you, Yanni, with your advocacy on behalf of your community. Acknowledging the Kaihotu, the chair of this board, of this committee, Pauline, who's shouldered the responsibility of guiding us to this point, because at the end of the day, we are the decision makers. The staff just present us with technical information, and it's up to us 17 to make the decision, but she has steered us through very stormy waters. One other person I want to mention is, and this refers to the fact that at the community evening meeting the other night, the community made it very clear that they felt that the commercial food waste was a major part of the problem. And, well, it was Councillor Major who has suggested that it be taken out and has put it into this recommendation. So thank you, Phil. So I'm supporting this amended recommendation, and I'm going to say that I'm proud of the fact that we are finally doing something about this. It's just good timing on my part that I ended up here at this point in time, but this should have been done before now, but finally we're doing it.
Ka pai, kia ora. All right, so I think most things have been said. I'd just like to wrap up to say, did you want, James?
I think it's all been said. My throat's killing me, but I'll debate with my vote. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So one of the key points here is that this is in the procurement will be fast tracking the redevelopment work, and that's key. Get this thing done, and I think I've heard Rowan state that it could be within 12 months, but of course it will be progressively happening along that time. Reducing the volume of the organic product that goes through to enable the fast tracking, and as we touched upon, removing the commercial food waste will be a huge help, I'm sure. And at the same time, we're future-proofing what we're doing by embracing future technology, including looking at an anaerobic system. Look, I'd really urge you to support 1E. I feel that, to me, it's pretty obvious if you've got a pile of compost outside and we know the strength of the wind in that area, it will become airborne. I believe that it would give comfort to the community to know that we are going to do this work as part of this project. And I think we need to give the community that comfort after what they've been through. If some people around this table think it's just going that little bit extra, well, good. Good. I'm proud of that. If that's going to help the community and help them sleep tonight and next week and next month, I would like you to support 1E for that reason. And On another note, we do know that there are other producers of odour in the area. We're stepping up, and thank you to staff for fast-tracking this from March. The adaptation plan didn't work so well, sure, but at the same time, bringing these options to us of this really incredible work of a redevelopment, not tinkering, a redevelopment. It's an incredible amount of work that staff have put into this, and I really want to thank you for it. And so these other odour producers, I'm hoping they will also step up and commit to reducing their odours that they are producing in the area. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do about the estuary, but we'll have to come to that one next. So anyway, today I'm also proud, as James has said, to be at this point we are actually doing something and giving the community some comfort that this problem is being addressed once and for all. So thank you everyone in this committee for working well together. Thanks for the support of my deputy as well. And also I'd like to thank Yanni for picking this up and bringing it to our attention loud and clear, especially this year. And we'll continue to work with the community and with Environment Canterbury and make sure that we are achieving the goals that we've set ourselves. Particularly thank you to Helen for the work that you've done on this. I know that you've really stepped up. So on that note, I will move 1E separately. So I'll put the motion for 1E. All those in favour say aye. 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 Opposed? No. Can you put your hands up for opposed? Do you want it noted? Yeah, okay. Sam and Sarah.
James. Did you say James?
Oh, and James? James, which way did
I'm supportive of 1E.
Thank you. So we've just got the two.
Sarah.
I'll now put the remainder of the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. I'll now call on James to close. I don't think we've got time to do the no.
Kia ora koutou, ka pai tō mahi o te ahi, te karakia iti, ka whakahokia ki te tapu o tātou kōrero, ka whakahokia ki te whare, haumie, huie,
tai kia.